Hello, welcome to Jewish Culture and Jewish Awareness. My name is Dustin Hausner. I'm the Jewish Outreach and Program Director. All Jewish programs is funded through the Jewish Federation of Northern New Jersey. So a number of our episodes, we talk about a number of different topics. Sometimes we're able to talk about a lot of interesting local history, local issues, things like that, which personally I enjoy. I always learn a lot about them, and I find a lot of our viewers enjoy learning a lot. So today we have someone who not only is the longest active member of the YMHA and the YMCA, but also has been a member of the board of directors, has been the former chairman of the Y Athletic Hall of Fame, is someone who's really been active and been there through a lot of the many changes throughout the years in this area, in Wayne, New Jersey, and the nearby area. So it is my great pleasure to introduce today's wonderful guest, Marty Rittenberg. Marty, it's so great to have you with us today.
Thank you, Dustin. It's my pleasure. As you know, I've been around the Y a long, long time, and I don't know of anyone else that has been a member of the Y longer than I. There are a couple of people that may be close, and that's kind of an unofficial title I gave myself. When I say a long time, we have to go back to the 1930s when my father, the late Marty Rittenberg, was the co-athletic director, along with the late Willie Singer, of the Patterson YM-YWHA. My father was on the staff from 1927 to 1947. So I was a little kid. I don't remember, but I'm told my mother would wheel me down to the Y in a stroller around 3 years of age, and then I would have the run of the place. So all the male members knew me. As I said, my father's name was Marty Rittenberg, well-known athlete in Patterson, and I was little Mort or Mort Jr. or Rit Jr., and so I knew all the active athletic members of the Y. Of course, my father, having coached the baseball and basketball teams through those years, I was always around, and so, of course, I got to know those people. On the Hall of Fame wall, there's a picture of the 1940 baseball team, which was an outstanding team, and I was the bat boy. I was 8 years old at the time. I unfortunately wasn't there when the picture was taken, but I remember those days of going around with a hat to make a collection on Sunday mornings when the Y played at Eastside Park in Patterson. And I went around with an adult, and I held the cap, and people would throw their nickels and dimes and pennies into it. So the total collection might have come to a few dollars, because you're talking about the late Depression years, and who had, any more than a few cents to contribute. As I said, I ran around the Y, the gym. I stayed away from the pool because when I was 4 or 5 years old, someone picked me up and threw me in the pool.
Wow.
And my father taught thousands of people to swim during summer programs.
Yeah.
I was his toughest customer until I had the nerve to put my face in the water and then start flailing my arms. I stayed in the gym shooting baskets by myself, or maybe with a couple of other people. I remember that was hindered in 1945 because of the flood. There was a Molly Ann Brook that ran underneath the Y building on Van Houten Street, and the Passaic River overflowed, and every other tributary in the area overflowed, and that came up through the gym floor. And they were painting the gym at the time, and there were these big buckets of paint standing around, and those all got knocked over. And the paint, of course, the boards were, the whole gym floor was warped. It was like like the ocean with waves. And they had to rip that up, and there were all these nails sticking up through the floor. And I'm shooting baskets there. Of course, I had sneakers on. obviously. Um, I'm thinking of so many different directions to go here.
Sure.
I remember, as I said, my father coached the baseball teams, and they played against barnstorming teams. I remember House of David would come in on a Sunday morning, and they all had beards like you, Dustin, or bigger ones. And I found out later on they weren't Jewish players, except one player, a basketball player from the Y, did play on the House of David basketball team during World War II. Trying to think of teams. Satchel Paige might have come in for all I know. And
so why don't I ask a couple questions? That way you're able to navigate a few in the direction. So obviously, you know, being rolled in on your stroller at 3 years old, obviously, you know, you've been coming for quite some time when this building was, you know, a YMHA and then became a YMCA. You were talking very passionately about obviously your athletic prowess, I'll put it that way, as well as, you know, your father's involvement with, you know, having you swim. I'm curious for you, you know, was the center of the YMHA mostly about, you know, focusing on the sports? Was there other programs that they did? Like, what was it for your younger years? And then as you got older, you know, were the programs pretty much the same throughout the time, or did they evolve and change, you know, as the years went by?
Good question. As a little kid, it was athletic because I hung around where my father was. During grammar school age, the programs for kids that age they were called the midgets. And on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday after school, you got down to the Y about 3:30, and there were organized programs run either by my father or Willie Singer, as I mentioned. That ran from 3:30 to 5. So there were seasonal sports in the gym. You played softball. You had to learn to drop the bat on the mat. You didn't fling it. If you dropped it, there were 3 outs. So you had maybe 50 kids were there, and you had 25 kids in the outfield. And if you hit the back of the track, the wall, that was a home run. Okay. Now, the gym, of course, was half the size of the current gym in the current building.
Right.
And the track was a 32nd of a mile. The current track is a 16th. So, you know, put that in perspective. As we got older, there were, you know, calisthenics, there might have been some marching, but mostly it was softball. It was a great big ball they call a mush ball, so nobody got hurt with it. And I remember sometimes the ball got stuck up in a pipe in the ceiling, and the only way to get it out, there were these rings that would come down like Olympic rings. And someone would put his legs in those rings, like sitting on a swing, and with a long pole, go up there and poke the ball out of those pipes. Because there wasn't much of a budget to buy athletic equipment back then during the war years. As we got older and became teenagers, we were then intermediates. That's what that group was called, the intermediates. Now, there were no girls. That's another thing I'll come to. And the intermediates were, I don't remember if it was every night, but it was from 6:30 or 6 to 8 or 8:30. And a lot of us, of course, were going to Hebrew school in those days. And there were 2 sessions. There was 4 to 5:30 and 5:30 to 7. So if you were fortunate enough to be in the first session, so at 5:30, you went to the Y, you hung around till 6:30, or maybe you went home if you lived a short distance and got dinner. If you were in the, I'm trying to get that in perspective. But anyway, we were able to juggle that with those time frames. As teenagers and high school kids, of course, we were fortunate enough to come down on Saturday nights to the dances.
Mhm.
And they were called Shangri-La
Okay.
because they stamped your hand with an, I guess, iridescent stamp that you held under a light.
Mhm.
So as you walked in, they could check you to see if you paid your dime to come in.
Sure.
And I guess it said Shangri-La.
Mhm.
And so many people met their future spouses going to the Shangri-La dances. So Saturday night, it was at the Patterson Y.
Mhm.
Sunday night dances, I believe, were Passaic Y. Now, this is primarily in the summertime.
Okay.
Monday nights were at the Hackensack Y. Thursday night was back at the Passaic Y. And then back, she started over again Saturday night at Patterson Y. Remember, the Y was closed on Saturday and didn't open until after sundown Saturday night. Now, let me backtrack a bit because in 1946, let me even go back a little further. As you came downstairs, when you entered the Y,
Mhm.
as a member, you picked up your membership card at the main desk.
Okay.
Then you went downstairs, and I think Bob Polton in his presentation a couple of months ago mentioned that you went downstairs to the gym area,
Mhm.
and you faced this huge closed-in thick wire mesh, what they called the cage, where all the members' baskets were with their shaving equipment and so forth. And there was an old elderly gentleman who worked in the cage from morning to night, giving out the baskets and selling towels for a nickel and a piece of soap for a penny. And he had been in the Spanish-American War, so he was up in years. But in the summer of '46, he got sick. And my father, who was still working there, put me in the cage for the summer.
Okay.
That sounds kind of ominous,
Right. If you.
putting me in the cage. So I worked from 9 in the morning till 9:30 at night with time off for lunch and dinner for the big payoff every week of $18.
Hmm.
And my father took 10 of those $10. No, he took $12, I think, and he put the rest in the bank for me. I gave me $2 a week, okay? And that money that I accumulated working in that cage for over 2 years, I saved enough money to go all through Patterson State Teachers College, which is now William Patterson University, because tuition then was $72.50 a term, and I worked off half of it on a work scholarship in the athletic department. So I learned to be frugal. Coming back to the cage, when school started, I worked from 6:30 in the evening until 9:30 at night, and Sundays all day. So I really didn't. I wasn't a member during. I guess I was a member during the years I worked there. But again, I still had the run of the place. Everybody knew me, and especially during after World War II, this was, and all these veterans were coming back, and knowing them all even before, because many of them were athletes. And I should go back now. During the war years, my father coached 3 basketball teams. There was a JV team of teenagers, and they were good enough to win the New Jersey State YM-YWHA Federation Championship, which was held in Bayonne every year. And that group, again, in 1947, with a couple of newer fellas, won it. And then in '49, my father wasn't at the Y anymore, but they won it again with another group. So 3 consecutive times they won the state Y Federation Championship. And I have a picture of the '49 team in my computer. I don't know if it's on the Y wall because I had arranged to put all those pictures up, since I was chairman of it. Now, on Saturday nights and then later Sunday, because it conflicted with the Y opening after Shabbos, the JV game started about 6 o'clock. The varsity game was about 8 o'clock. And the varsity, my father would invite teams down, neighborhood teams, YMCA teams from Patterson YMCA, other YMHAs and YMCAs. And there was always a fight with somebody. Larry Doby, the first black in the American League, who came from Patterson, came from my neighborhood. My father invited his team called the Buccaneers. And we knew all of them because they were scattered through our neighborhood where they lived. And so I got to know Larry Doby personally. And just to digress, when I was in the Navy in Washington, D.C. during the Korean War, Doby was with the Cleveland Indians. And anytime they'd come in to play against the Washington Senators, we would get tickets to go see them play. So I stayed around the dugout, and I saw Larry coming in. I hollered, "Larry." And he saw me and he said, "Holy expletive, Governor Street's here," because I lived on Governor Street in Patterson. Invited me to come down into the dugout, which was kind of thrilling because that was the 1954 team that won 111 games that year and got beat 4 straight by the New York Giants in the World Series. And when Willie Mays made that spectacular catch that I'm sure you've probably seen. So now back to the basketball games. That was the varsity game. Then there was a pro game that started about 9:30. From around the middle of 1930s, there was a booster team. That was the professional team. And the boosters were a group of business and professional men. They were the forerunner of the Executive Health Club, which no longer exists, which was upstairs when the Y opened until the YMCA took over. And my father would invite teams down that were professional, including the Harlem, not the Globetrotters, but the Harlem Renaissance. And I remember one night, one of the Renaissance players knocked the referee out cold. And because when a few of us who were left from that era remember that game, that's the first thing comes to mind. Oh, I remember the referee getting knocked out. There were teams that had players who played in professional leagues, and this is before the NBA, when the Eastern Pro League was the forerunner of the NBA, and guys would play with different teams. And probably the greatest basketball player that ever came out of the Patterson YMHA was a fellow by the name of Fishy Rabin, Phil Rabinowitz. And he played on probably a different professional team every night. He played for Trenton, he played for Jersey City, he played for the Patterson Crescents, and one or two other of the Patterson YMHA boosters also played for the Crescents. Phil Rabin was friendly with a fellow by the name of Chuck Connors. Ever hear of him?
The name rings a bell, but...
The rifleman on television from the early television days. And he played professionally, professional baseball for Montreal, the Dodgers Montreal team, and then they brought him up. He wasn't a great baseball player, but he hung around for a while. They traded him to Chicago Cubs, and he played on the Y Booster team one season. And he was known for his foul mouth. You could hear him in a game with his 4-letter words at the referee or whatever else. They were great games. They were great times because it brought down to the Y over 400 people who would fit in that gym and on the track. They'd put chairs all the way around the track, and maybe about 100 people would fit around the track. And there were three-level row bleachers all around the perimeter of the Y, so that players would scrape their shins along the bottom row of the bleachers. So it was hard for the referee. Well, the referee probably stayed in the middle somewhere because there was only one referee in those days. And it was hard to shoot because under the basket, because the track came around and it blocked your shot from going in from the side. And a lot of the visiting players found that out right away. There was dancing between the halves of those games. Right. Let me go back a little bit into the 30s, because my aunt and uncle were teenagers back then, and those dances were on Sunday afternoons, and they were called tea dances. So, were you about to ask me something?
Yeah, I was just going to ask, again, if you want to finish that, you're welcome to do so, but I was going to ask you, because obviously you have a long history locally with knowing different people who went out and did many different things in their athletic profession, as well as your own working there at the Y. I was just curious if you could tell us a little bit about how we got from there to having the Y Athletic Hall of Fame and your involvement as part of the board of directors.
Okay. Of course, having been known at the Y and being involved, someone recommended me for the board of directors. And I was called in by the former executive director, Mark Shore, and asked me why I wanted to be on the board of directors. I said, no, we have to turn that around. It's not a case of my wanting to be. I said, there are people who feel that I can contribute to the board of directors and to the Y, since I've been around here a long time and kind of know the workings of the Y. I'm trying to think now. I became somewhere at the same time, and this is now early 1990s.
Okay.
And let me connect that with the Hall of Fame.
Sure, please.
My father and a couple of others were the originators of the Hall of Fame. My father made a list of people from outstanding down to lower levels of people in all sports. And there were all sports at the Y back through the years. There was football, basketball, baseball, track, swimming, volleyball, you name it. They had it. The only thing they didn't have was golf. There were golfers, I guess, who that was a rich man's sport in those days. So the Hall of Fame got started. Some active people from the Y were on it. Sam Zakum was an early originator and stayed on the committee. There were others, Arnie Berger, Joe, I can't think of his name, last name, it escapes me.
You can always get back to this, it's okay.
Yeah. Anyway, these fellas met, they screamed, they argued, why do you want to put this guy in? Why that guy? Why? And it became, a good old boy buddy kind of thing. I'll vote for you, you vote for me. And my father would call me and say, my head's swimming from the meeting. Well, they started out putting like 5 and 6 people in every year, which was a mistake because it should have been spread out a little longer. And when they did have the induction on a Sunday afternoon, now in those days, the auxiliary gym in the lobby was the social hall.
Okay.
And there were 2 kosher kitchens in the back, and we had hot dog dinners. People paid about $1.50 to come in. Like 200 people would come to these inductions, because if, with 5 people being inducted, you brought a whole lot of friends and family.
Sure.
And it was a money-making thing because they built up a budget after a while.
Right.
Okay, so that was 1987, the first time.
Okay.
1989, my father passed away. So they put me on the committee. And I kind of began to steer things to be a little bit more uniform and organized.
Mm-hmm.
My first time on the board, on the committee, they had 2 people they were going to put in.
Okay.
I said, hold on, I got a few names I want to present.
Sure.
And I said, you put one person in from who was the editor, the sports editor of the Patterson Evening News,
Okay.
because there was a support side to this too.
Mm-hmm.
And he supported the Y with his newspaper print, with games, with pre-game stuff. And so I brought up the name of the sports writer from the other newspaper, the Patterson Morning Call. Well, what do you want to put him in for? Well, you know, he's done a great job representing the Y in print. So if you put the other guy in, why not this one?
Right.
Which they finally did. All right. And then 2 people on the board nominated each other. And I said, you know, you fellas should be honored by the Y, because there were fundraisers when the annual ad journal time came around. They raised a lot of money. They should be recognized in some manner, but they were not athletes.
Mm-hmm.
The rules to go on the criteria were pretty rigid.
Okay.
You had to have started your athletics in the Y, played for the Y at some level and gained recognition, and then gone on to either recognition at the high school, college, national or international levels. All right. So these fellas did not represent the Y. They were gym ball players, and they were not great. Okay. So I pushed for them to get recognition in other ways, and I guess they did in time. Kind of lost my train of thought here.
You were talking.
Oh, okay. So then the first chairman of the Hall of Fame, Fred Knockhamson, who had been an athlete in his day and had been inducted into the Hall of Fame, he moved away. So now there's no chairman. Well, Sam Zakum said, Marty, you're the chairman. I said, Sam, I'm the newest and youngest fella on the committee. You have others. Right. I said, you're the chairman, and I want you to keep this thing going, which I did. But we had a lull for a couple of years in the early 2000s. When a new director came in, fellow by the name of Steve Allen, not the TV Steve Allen, but this fellow his time at the Y was short-lived, but he wanted me to get the thing going again, which we did, and it's going on ever since until I decided it was time for me to step down. So we did not have a budget anymore, and the YMHA and YMCA continued to support the program. Sure. Now, this is, and still is, as long as it continues, a YM-YWHA of North Jersey Hall of Fame. And that's been recognized by the YMCA because Laura has continued that and supported us. And she was very helpful, especially on the mornings of the inductions. We had on Sunday mornings, and we had refreshments. She pitched right in and helped to set up the refreshments, and she's been great. So, and then one year, the committee brought my name up. They wanted my resume. Mm-hmm. I reluctantly, I said, why? I'm the chairman. Why are you putting me in? Well, a couple of reasons. I refereed high school and college football and basketball for many years. and got my start as a basketball referee at the Y. When I was playing basketball for Patterson State Teachers College, there was a Y adult indoor basketball league. He's called it the Sunday Morning League. There were 2 games on Sunday morning, and there were 2 high school club games on Sunday afternoons.
Okay.
So I was asked if I wanted to referee the Sunday Morning League. And yes, for $1 a game, they paid me. And I brought along one of my college teammates who was also a longtime member of the Y from the time he was a little kid. So we refereed those games and the high school club games. Those games we got $1 a game also. And I did that for 2 years. And following that, I went into military service after college graduation. But when I came back out, I got back involved with refereeing, not at the Y anymore, but I began to study for the state basketball test to become a high school level referee, which I passed and worked my way up into the college ranks. So there were like 150 ball games a year I worked at the Y and in the Patterson City Leagues until I got my license and went on to higher things. So according to, as far as the Hall of Fame committee was concerned, I met the criteria for induction. I gained recognition. I started my athletics as a referee, although I played baseball and basketball at the Y, but I wouldn't be put in the Hall of Fame for those sports because I didn't reach a level of recognition, right? And I played in high school and in college as well. But they could see me in their achieving the criteria as a referee. And also the other part of it as a support person, because as I said, there were 2 ways you could be inducted.
Right.
The support part of it being keeping the Hall of Fame going. So I said, as they were, I gave my resume to one of the committee members, and I said, fellas, I'm walking out of the room. And you call me back in, you can call, talk about me, and if you put me in, I will consider it an honor and be very humbled by it. And I would, it would be an outstanding thing for me to be on that wall next to my father's plaque. Okay. So I went out. 10 minutes later, they called me back in and their heads were down low. And I said, oh, okay. And then they all stood up and cheered and congratulated me. And that was a great feeling. And there were two of myself and a fellow by the name of Stanley Blake, who way back as a teenager, he was like a bigger brother, a big brother to me. And I nominated him because he had been a Y basketball player and went on to play basketball. He played at Patterson East Side High School and at Newark Rutgers School of Pharmacy. And he gained his letter there. So I felt that he reached the criteria. And so I inducted him, I presented him, and then one of the committee members presented me. So we went in together, and his plaque is hanging below my father's plaque. So my father was his coach to begin with at the Y. And the Blake and Chesson, his in-laws, the Chesson family, we go back many, many years. In fact, the 1925 YM-YWHA football team, and there are 2 different pictures of that team on the Hall of Fame wall. My father, Phil Chesson, and Brooks, Phil Chesson's his daughter's father-in-law.
Okay.
those three are on that picture with a lot of prominent Patterson men. And also there's the opposite end of the stick, because there was one guy who was involved with the Jewish mafia back in the 20s who was on that team.
Wow.
And as my father told me, they found him in the gutter one night. The mob took care of him. So there's a whole lot of other kind of history that goes on as well.
So two questions I definitely want to ask. One is, obviously, not only do you have, just a lot of local experiences with the Y, but you have this great pride in being from this area. You've been fortunate enough to know a number of different people. You've been honored. You've done different leadership roles. After all this time, you've chosen to stay here, the place you basically grew up and decided to be part of. And I think for many people, people move, people, live in different places, but you chose to stay. And I'm curious, for you, what made you want to stay in your local community? What made you want to continue to be engaged locally here after all this time?
Well, I grew up in Patterson, and that was a great place to have come from. It was a wonderful city. The Y was, as kids, our second home, and growing up in the Y, we stayed connected. And when I married, I lived in Clifton for a short time, and then built my house here in Wayne, within walking distance of the Y. I don't know if you know where the Boys Club is.
Yes.
Boys and Girls Club. I'm 1 block down from there on Palmer Drive. Been here 58 years in my house. So of course, when the Y came up to Wayne, that was fantastic. That was wonderful for me and anyone else who was from the old Y and lived in the area. So I'm a member, continuously through the years. I stayed here. Of course, when the YMCA came, it was kind of a partnership, and ironed out the initial details of the. I don't know if you can call it a merger, but I stayed, and we were recognized and respected, and we became together. We came together. So I had no desire to move away. So where am I going to go to? My history's there. My growing up years. If that's the answers the question.
Yeah, no, and one of the nice things, especially when I first started, is if you go to the Wayne YMCA, you see, these different markings and things from the YMHA. You see, there's the Jewish veterans. You see, obviously, the Y Hall of Fame, as you mentioned. You have that nice corridor where it shows, past teams and things. So there definitely is a celebration of its history, which is very heartwarming and certainly very interesting to learn about. I'm curious, in regards to the Y today, unfortunately we have COVID-19, which exists right now, and every place is dealing with it to the best they can with CDC and things like that. You've chosen to still be involved and active with the Y even through COVID, which is certainly appreciated. For you, what is the reason why the Y is so important? Like, why should people still come and support? Obviously, they have to feel safe and comfortable doing it, but why are organizations like this important for communities or to be involved with?
Well, they serve multi-purpose. It's a center of athletics, of culture, religion to some degree, because they were having a church service for a particular group of people on Sunday mornings. I don't know if that's still going on. It serves people of all ages. The Blue Streak swim program is a terrific thing. In fact, we would select scholarship honorees, from for the Hall of Fame.
Mhm.
Uh, just an aside here, there are two people in that Hall of Fame,
Mhm.
on that wall, who were scholarship winners as high school graduating seniors,
Mm.
who went on to greater things. One became a professional golfer, went to Kansas University on a 4-year golf scholarship. He's now a teaching pro at Montclair Country Club.
Nice.
And last year, I think the last scholarship or the one before, or induction, was a young lady by the name of Megan O'Donnell, who was an outstanding blue streak swimmer, set records at Wayne Valley High School, got a scholarship to Notre Dame to swim there, and competed in Big Ten competition, broke and set records, and was a very charming young lady who lives in town. Last I was in touch with her, she was working on a master's degree in business at Notre Dame again. So, that's another area. Well, that's the athletic area that it serves. What else can I say? It covers so many areas that, and it gave you a job. So
I'm not gonna lie, I do appreciate having a job. I'm not, and especially in very hectic times. And the nice part is, as the Jewish outreach person, not only is it doing like interviews like this, but learning about local Jewish history and learning about different interesting people. We have some great rabbis in the local area. We have
right, sure.
organizations. We started chatting because you had watched the recent interview with the Jewish Historical Society, which was a couple weeks ago, which went really nicely. So there's a lot of really nice connections, and I'm continuously learning. And obviously, there's certainly a lot I've learned just from this interview alone, which is wonderful, and what you hope for when you have a conversation like this. So I will ask, because so far you've what's called name dropping. You've mentioned quite a few people who came from the area and went out and became very successful in professional sports in some way, shape, or form. Is there anyone who came from this area that people may not know about that should know about when it comes to either sports or just someone who you may have known or someone you may have met, who made it in some way, shape, or form that people may not know about?
Well, you can pick many of the people who are on that Hall of Fame wall from the athletic point of view. There are people in various professions, business, who were connected with the Y. Years back, there were many more cultural and social and cultural organizations. There was a famous club back then called the Roosevelts, and there were people of all walks of life in that club. I remember seeing a picture somewhere in the Y that had like 5 tiers of people, and in an 8x10 picture.
Yeah.
And so many of them were prominent. I'm trying to think. I had an uncle who was a member, my father's brother, who became a prominent lawyer in Patterson, and there were designs on him by his political party to get him into politics. But unfortunately, he passed away at a young age, and he belonged to a group called the Colsos, which was a cultural and social club with many prominent men in it. Oh, let me come back to the women's aspect. Remember I said there were no girls?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Remember, it was a YM-YWHA, so the women were recognized. And women were involved in many, many activities, and especially during World War II, when the Y was open to the military who were stationed all around Patterson. Because remember, Patterson had numerous aircraft plants and propeller plants. And also there was an anti-aircraft battery stationed up on the top of Garrett Mountain, which overlooks Patterson. So the Y was opened and they called it Coffee and. So troops came in. I'm sure it was open 24 hours a day. And women's club, and probably, women not in the women's club, they made sandwiches for the troops, which were mainly soldiers in the area. And they were entitled to use the gym and the swimming pool.
Okay.
And my father told a story of there was a soldier who was using the swimming pool, and he was swearing to beat the band. And when this fellow was getting dressed, my father noticed he's buttoning his collar, and he had on one collar, it said US, as they all had. On the other collar was the cross. He was a chaplain.
Huh.
My father, if that's your title, he said, I don't understand. You're a man of the cloth, and I hear all these 4-letter words coming out. He says, son, when my collar is off, I'm just like you and anybody else. So I always thought that was humorous. So, okay, now the women were entitled to use the Y on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Okay.
All day except the hours of 5 to 7, when the men could come down and use the Y.
Okay.
Okay. And since I was working in that cage at the time, I had to put a screen. There was a screen that opened, like it had 3 sections.
Oh, okay.
A dressing screen.
Yeah.
And that was a signal to the men who came down 5 to 7. You didn't go into that one section, because that's where the women were. And there were times men made a mistake, and the next thing I hear is screaming, "Get out of here!" And the women, these guys would come out red-faced, and yeah, that was funny. I think, if I recall, on Sunday afternoons, the women were allowed to use the gym, because I remember badminton games, mixed badminton games on Sunday afternoons. There was a certain group of people that played badminton.
Well, I was going to just say, I know on like the wall of fame, there's a diversity of men and women that have been honored throughout the years. So obviously,
yeah. Well, we have 2 women now, and we're always trying to find a woman to go on there. Up until I guess maybe 10 years ago, we didn't have a woman on the committee until someone recommended Barbara Keel, who was an outstanding racket play. I guess, I don't know whether it's racket or squash that she played, but outstanding, and we honored her. And then the second one was Megan O'Donnell, the swimmer.
Right.
Prior to that, there were no women's, there was no women's competition. On the wall is the 1929 through 1931 women's basketball team.
Right.
I don't know who they played, and we did honor the team at a Hall of Fame induction one year. There was one person left alive from that team. I'm sure she's gone by now. They didn't play men's rules in those days, the women. They played a half-court game. They were either guards who guarded the forwards, who were the only ones allowed to shoot the ball, because the guards could only go up to half court. And today, women's basketball is a men's game. I mean, they're fantastic. So it changed over the years. And there's, in fact, today, the only real competition that Y teams have is the swim teams. And I don't know if they still have the basketball traveling teams, the teenagers.
Right.
So I would meet also with oh, come on, I can't think of her name, with the current program director.
Oh, you mean what, Alcione, or are you talking about specifically?
Is it Stacy?
Well, if you're talking about like membership, that would be Alcione. If you're talking about Kathy, who's the gym,
In the gym area.
yeah, that would be Kathy. So
Kathy?
yeah, so I mean, there's a
Doesn't
couple
ring a bell.
people. So
Whose office is right near the Hall of Fame wall?
yeah, that one. Well, we'll talk offline because we're getting into the weaves a little bit.
Okay. Okay.
But let me ask you before we kind of wrap up a little bit, because obviously there's a lot of great information you've been telling us also about the why, the different stages throughout. If a person was still interested, I mean, again, obviously we have COVID-19 right now, but interested to learn more about the Y Athletic Hall of Fame, or to learn a little bit more about the history, or potentially want to get a scholarship for their kid or grandkid or so forth, what is the best way for people to learn more?
As far as Hall of Fame, that comes from recommendations.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's the committee that really has been making the recommendations. And there aren't too many people left anymore because, the competition, well, there's the squash area, I guess that's all that's played now as far as racket games of squash. John Cosme, he's a member of the committee and he's involved with the squash area. They might approach him. Others on the committee are Larry Fechner, Larry Seidman,
Mm-hmm.
Libby Arlick. Did I mention them all? Jack Zakem.
Okay.
So you know these people, I guess. And as far as scholarships, just there are only two areas: the gym area, and if in the last few years there haven't been any candidates because there hasn't been much going on, in any kind of competition. So we've only been drawing from the blue streaks. So somebody to be considered would have to be on the blue streaks. And then I always met with Vlad.
Okay.
At Bubble.
Yeah, yep.
He was my go-to guy.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Good, great guy. Yeah. So and it's been getting harder and harder. Yeah. So as I mentioned, I retired from my roughly 30-year job as a chairman, and in my notes to everybody, I quoted Sam Zakem telling me to keep the committee going, and I admonished the committee to keep it going. Yeah. So I hope it continues because there's a lot of legwork involved, and I truly hope it doesn't die off. So.
Well, I just want to obviously say, Marty, I really do appreciate you taking the time to teach us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about local history, a little bit about obviously the history of the Y and the sports. Of course, we hope all the best for our athletic programs, as well as a lot of people who you even mentioned during this interview of great stars and people who've come from this area. So I want to thank you, Marty, for your time today. I want to wish everyone out there to stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure, Dustin.